Chapter 1: Ashes in the Snow. The first time Detective Ivan Murphy saw the body, the snow hadn't yet covered it. It was January 7th, 1984, northern Michigan, temperature hovering just under 10 degrees, the air so sharp it cut through the wool of his overcoat. He stood at the edge of the tree-line outside Ironwood, breath spilling into the morning like cigarette smoke. The scene had been cordoned off with yellow tape, strung awkwardly between frozen pine trunks that creaked like old ships in the wind. A deputy's flashlight beam bounced across the drift, illuminating the body in flashes. The victim was on her knees in the snow, arms outstretched as if pleading with God, her head bowed forward. Blood had frozen into her hair, crusted along her pale cheeks like cracked varnish. At her feet, in the circle of tamped-down snow, blackened ash had been scattered in a deliberate pattern, spirals curling inward to a center point, then breaking apart like some primitive star. Ivan crouched, his knees groaning against the cold, and peered closer. The victim's throat had been opened clean, almost surgically precise. But there was something worse. Her lips had been sewn shut with coarse twine, each stitch punched roughly through skin that had torn under the strain. Whoever had done this hadn't been in a hurry. They'd worked slowly, methodically. Behind him, the deputy shifted his boots in the snow. "Jesus Christ," the kid muttered, his voice cracked with nerves. Ivan didn't answer. He'd been on the homicide squad for 12 years, long enough to have seen women butchered by jealous husbands, drunks gone off the rails, mob hits left rotting in ditches. But this was something else. This was theater. He pulled his notepad from his coat, scribbled observations with stiff fingers. The scene smelled faintly of iron, of old fire, though there was no woodpile or remnants of a campfire nearby. Just the cold, the body, and the spirals in the snow. Who found her? Ivan asked, his voice even. Snowmobiler. Said he thought it was a scarecrow at first. Poor bastards puking his guts out in the cruiser. Ivan nodded absently. He stepped closer to the ash spirals, crouched until the wool of his slacks brushed the snow. He touched the ash lightly with his glove, rubbed it between his fingers. Cold. Charcoal, maybe bone. He couldn't tell in the field. The coroner's van arrived half an hour later, skidding onto the icy service road. The driver killed the lights, and two men in white coats hauled out their stretcher. Ivan stood back, hands buried in his pockets, as they cut the stitches from the woman's lips and bagged her carefully. She was mid-20s, maybe younger, hair still glinting with blonde under the dried blood. A local? A drifter? Whoever she'd been, someone had chosen to turn her into a message. When the coroner zipped the body bag, Ivan lit a cigarette. He didn't often smoke anymore. His wife hated the smell, but the habit crept back whenever the air felt too heavy. He drew in slow, watching the cigarette tip glow like a coal in the dark. "You think this is some cult shit?" the deputy asked. His voice trembled, the bravado thin. Ivan blew out smoke. "I think somebody wants us to believe it is." Back at the precinct, the fluorescent lights hummed like insects. The Ironwood PD was a squat brick building with water-stained ceilings, the kind of place where paint curled away from the walls in long strips. Ivan sat at his desk, a styrofoam cup of coffee cooling at his elbow. Photographs of the crime scene spread across the blotter. The photos made his skin crawl in a way no other case had. The ritualistic arrangement, the spirals of ash, the lips sewn shut. The killer wasn't hiding his work. He was presenting it, like an artist leaving a signature on a canvas. Captain Reynolds leaned against the doorframe, chewing on a toothpick. His face was ruddy, jowls sagging from 30 years of bad coffee and whiskey. "You look like hell, Murph," he said. Ivan kept his eyes on the photographs. "Seen worse. Not like this, though." "You think it's the same guy from last month? The one in Wisconsin?" Ivan nodded slowly. Patterns match. Throat cut. Ash at the scene. Lips sewn shut. He tapped the photo with a finger. "This guy's traveling. Crossing state lines." Reynolds grunted. "Means the feds'll stick their noses in soon. You better get ahead of it." "I intend to." The captain left, the echo of his boots fading down the hall. Ivan leaned back in his chair, staring at the water stain above his desk. It looked almost like a map, branching out like rivers on a faded atlas. He closed his eyes for a moment, forcing calm into his chest. The brutality of it all pressed against him like a weight, but he'd learned long ago that panic solved nothing. Concentration was survival. Still, he couldn't shake the image of the woman's mouth, torn at the corners by crude stitches. What message was the killer trying to send by silencing her? And the ash, why the ash? It gnawed at him, the not knowing. By the third day, the autopsy results came back. Ivan stood in the tiled morgue, the smell of disinfectant sharp in his nostrils. Dr. Pennington, the coroner, was a pale, thin man with glasses that slid constantly down his nose. He pulled the sheet back to reveal the victim again. The harsh light made her skin waxy, unreal. Time of death was approximately 36 hours before discovery, Pennington said, voice clinical. Cause of death: exsanguination from the throat wound. Pre-mortem restraint marks on the wrists and ankles. Mouth sewn shut post-mortem. No sexual assault. What about the ash? Ivan asked. Pennington's brow furrowed. We tested it. Charred bone fragments mixed with wood ash. Human bone, Murphy. Burned down to powder. Ivan's stomach tightened. He burned someone else? Then scattered them? Possibly. Or he ground down old remains. Hard to say without more samples. Ivan stared at the body, lips pressed thin. Human bone dust, sewn lips, spirals in the snow. The brutality wasn't random. It was deliberate, ritualistic. This wasn't murder for passion or money. This was something older, darker. Any ID? He asked. Pennington shook his head. Nothing yet. No fingerprints in the system. Dental records might take weeks. Ivan left the morgue with the weight of silence pressing hard in his ears. Outside, the snow had started again, falling in thick flakes that muffled the world. He stood under the overhang, collar up against the wind, and lit another cigarette. The flame flickered in the cold, stubborn against the gust. The next week blurred into interviews, dead ends, and restless nights. Ivan combed through missing persons reports, compared them against the victim's description. He drove to taverns and diners, asking questions, flashing her photo. Most people shook their heads. Some swore they'd seen her at the bus station or working the counter at a grocery store in Bessemer, but nothing stuck. She was a ghost already, erased before she'd ever been found. At night, Ivan sat in his apartment, nursing bourbon with the lights dimmed low. His wife had left 2 years ago, taking their daughter back to Milwaukee. The silence of the place still hurt, though he wouldn't admit it out loud. Sometimes he left the TV on just for the noise. One night, close to midnight, he spread the crime scene photos across his kitchen table. The spirals of ash caught his eye again. He traced the pattern with his fingertip, slow, thoughtful. Spirals inward, then breaking apart at the center. It wasn't random. It meant something. He flipped through old case files, yellowed news clippings from other ritual murders in the Midwest. A farmer's body found outside Green Bay, throat cut, ash scattered. A young hitchhiker in Duluth, lips sewn shut. Wisconsin, Minnesota, now Michigan. The killings were moving east, as if the murderer were carving his way across the map. And then something struck him. In each case, the ash had been arranged differently. Spirals in Ironwood, crosshatches in Green Bay, circles in Duluth. Shapes that meant nothing to him, but maybe to the killer they were letters. A language written in bone dust. The thought chilled him more than the January air. On January 19th, another body turned up. This time, it was a trucker found slumped against a pine tree along a logging road outside Marquette. Same wound, same sewn lips, but the ash. This time it had been arranged in jagged, intersecting lines that radiated outward like a sunburst. Ivan drove 4 hours through snow-choked highways to reach the site. When he stepped from his car, the cold punched into his lungs like a fist. Deputies moved nervously around the scene, their voices hushed, as if they feared being overheard by the forest itself. He approached the body slowly. The trucker's hands were bound in front of him, palms pressed together in grotesque parody of prayer. His lips bulged around the stitches. Flies had frozen into tiny black jewels on the corners of his mouth. Ivan crouched, staring at the sunburst pattern. Ash, human bone again. The killer had changed his symbol, shifted his message. 2 victims in less than 2 weeks. He was accelerating. Ivan rose, jaw tightening. His calm exterior never cracked, not in front of the uniforms, but inside something hot coiled in his chest. Not fear, anger. Anger at the brutality, at the ritual, at the way the killer treated lives like props in a play only he understood. He lit another cigarette, smoke drifting upward into the snow-thick sky. He swore to himself, silent and absolute. He would not stop. Not until the man behind this horror was in the ground. The killer thought he was writing in bone and blood, but Ivan Murphy had made a promise. He'd learned the language. He'd read it back to him. Chapter 2, Blood in the Pines. The second body didn't leave Ivan's thoughts, not even after the coroner zipped the trucker into a black bag and loaded him into the van. On the long drive back to Ironwood, the road stretched endlessly through the pines, headlights catching frozen branches like shards of glass. His cigarette pack sat empty on the passenger seat. He gripped the wheel tighter, jaw locked, running through the facts over and over. 2 murders in under 2 weeks. Same staging, same bone ash, same stitches. The killer was no drifter moving on impulse. He was purposeful. He had a route. Ivan pulled into the precinct near dawn. The parking lot was a white sheet of snow. Only 2 other cars huddled near the entrance. Inside, the building was dead quiet, fluorescent tubes buzzing like nervous teeth. He dropped his coat on the back of his chair, sat heavily, and opened the case file again. The trucker's name was Earl Jensen, 39, 2 kids, divorced, worked out of Marquette, ran cargo downstate. No criminal record, no enemies that anyone could name. Just another working man, erased and turned into a message. Ivan rubbed his temples, eyes gritty from lack of sleep. Why Jensen? Why the blonde girl? There had to be a thread, something linking them together. The killer wasn't random, not with his theatrics. The spirals, the sunburst, the ash. This was choreography. He poured stale coffee into a paper cup, black as tar, and stared at the photos. One by one, he laid them out across his desk until the surface disappeared beneath images of blood and snow. 2 corpses, 2 arrangements of ash. He studied them until the lines blurred. Then he noticed something. The spirals from the girl's scene had 12 coils. The sunburst at Jensen's scene had 12 spokes. 12, not 11, not 13. Ivan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Michigan winter. Pattern, a count, maybe a calendar, maybe a ritual number. He scribbled notes furiously, then leaned back, exhaling through his teeth. If 12 was the number, then 2 bodies meant only one thing. 10 more to go. By the time daylight broke, Captain Reynolds came lumbering into the squad room, smelling of whiskey hidden under mouthwash. He stopped at Ivan's desk, eyes scanning the spread of photographs. Christ, Murph, don't you ever sleep? Not when bodies are stacking up like this. Reynolds pinched the bridge of his nose. Marquette PD is screaming for answers. State police want in. The feds are circling like vultures. You got anything I can feed them before they chew my ass raw? Ivan tapped his pen against the desk. The patterns aren't random. The killer's staging these scenes as part of a sequence. He used 12 elements both times. That can't be coincidence. You telling me we're looking at 10 more before he's done? That's exactly what I'm telling you. The captain swore under his breath. You better be wrong, Murphy, for everyone's sake. That afternoon, Ivan drove north to Marquette to speak with Jensen's ex-wife. The drive was bleak, endless stretches of white forest broken only by the occasional gas station with flickering neon signs. The radio spat static more often than music, but he kept it on anyway. Silence gnawed at him too much. Jensen's ex lived in a modest ranch house on the edge of town, Christmas lights still sagging from the eaves even though the season had passed. She was a worn-looking woman in her late 30s, with dark circles under her eyes and a cigarette burning down to ash between her fingers. Ivan introduced himself, showed his badge, and she waved him inside without a word. The house smelled of smoke and reheated coffee. 2 kids' toys were scattered on the rug, silent reminders that their father wasn't coming home. She sat heavily on the couch, lit another cigarette, and blew smoke toward the ceiling. "You're here about Earl?" "Yes, ma'am." Ivan sat across from her. "I know this isn't easy, but I need to ask some questions." Her eyes flickered, but she nodded. "Did Earl have anyone after him? Debt? Enemies? Trouble on the road?" She barked a humorless laugh. "Earl? Hell no. He wasn't that interesting. Drove his truck, drank his beer, paid his child support when he remembered. He wasn't a saint, detective, but he didn't deserve." Her voice cracked. She stubbed out the cigarette hard, leaving a smear of ash on the glass tray. Ivan leaned forward, voice low and calm. "Did he mention anything unusual? Someone following him? Strange deliveries?" She hesitated, chewing her lip. Then, "He said something last week. Thought it was just Earl being dramatic. He called me late, drunk. Said he picked up a load from some warehouse outside Ashland. Said the place gave him the creeps. Smelled like a funeral home," he said. "Ashland." Ivan repeated. "That was across the border, northern Wisconsin." "Did he say who owned it?" "No, just that he couldn't wait to get the hell out of there." Ivan scribbled it in his notebook. "Ashland, warehouse, funerary smell." His gut tightened. It fit too neatly with bone ash scattered in the snow. That night, Ivan checked into a cheap motel off Route 2. He lay awake on the hard mattress, staring at the water stains spreading across the ceiling. His mind wouldn't shut off. Ashland, warehouse, 12 victims. Somewhere out there, a man was planning his next tableau. 3 a.m., Ivan gave up on sleep. He dressed, holstered his revolver, and went back out into the night. The snow had eased into a thin flurry, but the roads were near deserted. He drove west, headlights carving through the black until the faint orange glow of Ashland appeared on the horizon. The town was quiet, industry slumbering under the weight of winter. Ivan cruised the back roads until he found the warehouse district. Half the buildings were abandoned, windows boarded or shattered, graffiti scrawled across metal siding. He parked, stepped out into the frozen silence, and scanned the rows of warehouses. The air smelled faintly of rot and something chemical, a sour tang that turned his stomach. He pulled his collar up and walked slowly, listening. Snow crunched beneath his boots. One building stood out. Its windows were intact, no graffiti on the walls, but there were tracks in the snow leading to the loading dock. Fresh tracks. Ivan's pulse quickened. He placed a hand on the butt of his revolver and approached. The padlock on the door hung broken, swinging slightly in the wind. He pushed the door open with the barrel of his gun. Inside, the warehouse was cavernous and dim. Dust hung in the air. The smell hit him first. Char, smoke, and something bitter underneath. He swept his flashlight across the floor. Not scattered spirals this time, but mounds of it, piled like dunes across the concrete. White flecks shone within the gray, bone fragments. Ivan's throat tightened. He stepped deeper inside, light sweeping over rusted machinery and broken pallets. In the far corner, something gleamed. He moved closer. A chair, wooden, sturdy, bolted to the floor. Leather straps hung from its arms and legs. Stained dark, Ivan's stomach lurched. A ritual seat, a place for the killer's victims before he staged them. On the wall behind the chair, drawn in thick black charcoal, was another symbol. A circle split by 12 lines, like a crude clock face. 12. Always 12. Ivan's hand trembled around the flashlight. He forced his breathing steady. The killer had been here. Maybe it still was. A sound broke the silence. A faint scrape, metal against metal, from deeper in the warehouse. Ivan froze, gun up, ears straining. "Police!" His voice echoed off the concrete walls. "Show yourself." Silence. Then footsteps, quick, receding. Ivan bolted after them, flashlight beam bouncing across ash mounds and rusted beams. He saw a shadow flicker between columns, long coat whipping as it disappeared through a side door. "Stop!" Ivan roared, but the figure was already gone, boots crunching into the snow outside. He burst through the door a heartbeat later, lungs burning with cold. But the lot was empty. Only the storm, the wind erasing tracks as fast as they were made. He stood there, revolver shaking slightly in his grip, until his breath steadied. The killer had been here. He'd been so close he could almost smell the smoke on him. And now he knew Ivan was on his trail. Chapter 3, Whispers in the Cold. The wind erased everything. Ivan stood in the empty lot outside the Ashland warehouse, revolver still in his hand, the snow swallowing every trace of the figure he'd chased. The storm was merciless, flurries whipping sideways, footprints disappearing in seconds. It was as if the night itself had swallowed the man whole. Finally, Ivan holstered his gun. His teeth were clenched so hard his jaw ached. He had been seconds away. One heartbeat, and now he had nothing but ash and shadows. He turned back toward the warehouse, forcing himself to slow down, to breathe. He swept it again with his flashlight, methodical, detail by detail. The chair bolted to the floor, the 12-line circle on the wall, the mounds of ash that seemed to pulse faintly under the beam, like dunes of the dead. This wasn't just a kill site, it was preparation, a workshop. On the far wall, something caught his eye, scraps of newspaper pinned with rusty nails. He moved closer, scanning them. Obituaries. Each one clipped carefully, each marked in red ink with dates and numbers. 6 names circled. 3 from Wisconsin, 2 from Minnesota, 1 from Illinois. The victims. Ivan's throat tightened as he ran his finger over the names. The blonde girl and Jensen weren't listed yet, which meant the killer hadn't updated his record. He was keeping score. And then Ivan saw something else. At the bottom of the wall, scribbled in charcoal, was a message. 12 mouths sealed, 12 voices silenced. The circle closes.